So the first thing I'm going to just do is pop off everything that was holding that together while the glue dried. Put my pegs here and keep them in the bag so I don't lose them. So useful. And the elastic bands that we're holding everything nice and round around the fuselage. So there we go. So now what we have is a nice clean edge on the bottom here, and you can see it. You know, the edge that I was looking at, it goes up, you know, cleanly and against the edge here. As usual with these Dancing Wings models, that just fits really perfectly. Everything just slots nicely into place. And then there's a bend at that where the serrations were, and then the base of the fuselage continues along here. And there will be in a minute, later, because I'm not going to do it yet, I'm going to actually put the top on. This will be where the hatch comes out at the bottom of the model, again for the battery component and to get at things like the servos. So that's looking good. We'll move on to that in a minute. Second piece here that we had worked on in parallel is the cowling. And the cowling, in case you're not familiar with the word, is really the front piece of the plane that protects the engine. So that will actually end up fitting on the front here. Probably even now it might clip on if I can figure out where those little pieces connect to. That cowling will basically clip on the front of the fuselage here, like that. It's kind of clipped into place, and there's some slots there that I have to line up, and I'll figure that out. I can figure that out now. Right, there we go. So those two slots, the tags that we've got here on each side, basically it seems like they clip into the two tags on the side of the cowling here. And what's going to happen is that then the planking will go around there, and in the end it'll make a really nice you know, kind of sculpted look to the front of that Sopwith pup. That looks so nice when you get when you see the real planes, or when we get to the point of having this model complete. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually complete the planking. So I was going to cut this out before I started the video, but then I noticed some little things that you might want to follow along with, just to make sure that everything fits together. The key is that on both of these planks, which are going to fold around all the way around here, it's literally going to bend 180 degrees for each one of them. There's also this little tag. There's one here, and there's one here, a tiny little tag that sticks out from here, and these are where there's a little slot at the end of each one of these pieces that is basically cut out to fit those tags. So what we want to do is, when we cut these pieces out, and they're mostly cut as usual with the laser cut, they're cut almost through, but they've left some extra long sections here, and I'm pretty sure that's because this is such a lightweight piece of balsa. So I've checked twice, as you always should. Measure twice, cut once, and made sure that based on the pictures that you see in the instructions here, that there's nothing that I'm missing. So I'm fairly sure that I'm right here, that these tags, well, these lines here that you can see actually continue on, and so I basically need to cut that straight through to join up with the laser cut piece there. And if on this corner here, there's the little tiny bit of corner that's missing, and what we have to do is just cut up to that, but not beyond it. And the same thing happens at this end as well. And so hopefully you guys following along, seeing that I'm doing it and then it actually works, means you'll be able to have all the confidence in the world when you go ahead and do yours, without having to say, I think that's what I'm supposed to do, but the instructions don't really say exactly. We should be able to, whoops, that hasn't quite come off cleanly, so I'm just going to clean that edge off there. And then we get, so these are waste. These extra pieces from outside, they're not used for anything. They might come in handy later, so I'm going to keep them. But now we have our two pieces of planking that are going to go around, that are basically going to fold around the cowling here and make it look really nice. So I'm not going to bend that yet, because even though it is very soft, if I do try and bend it, it's guaranteed to break. And this is why I have prepared before, ready for this. I have a dish of water, and I'm just going to soak that in water. It's really quite magic how this works. Seems like such a simple thing. And you know, I've seen people say they soak it for hours and hours. I did try this on the previous build that I've talked about before, the Dancing Wings Fokker Eindecker 3. I think it's the K08 version, mini. Soaking the wood that needed to be bent for that one, you know, 10 to 15 minutes max was plenty. And that might be overdoing it. I'm kind of thinking that even now that would be enough, but I'm gonna let it soak through. Better to be safe than sorry, as they always say. So while that's happening, I think the next thing we need to do is to find the top of the fuselage here, because that's the last little piece we need. And again, check the plans, follow along, but yeah, what we're looking for is the piece called G, and it's a capital G, so that will mean it's soft balsa, and that makes sense because it's going to have to bend over the top of the plan, and that will be the next thing that we stick in together. So now I could, on the other hand, I could finish the hatch as well, and potentially that's a good idea. And that would be kind of more interesting too, because cutting out the hatch is actually the next thing on the plan, and putting in the magnets and the extra little pieces. So I think I might, while that's soaking, that might make a nice little diversion, the right amount of time to work through, cut out the hatch, and then finish that off with putting on the top of the fuselage. So actually what I'll do is I'll just pop that piece out, make sure I've got it handy and ready for when I get there. And here we go. Here it's this piece here on this sheet, labeled below the, actually just below it, it's labeled here capital G, and you can see that that's got the cutout there for the cockpit, so that will be, and it's not quite coming off cleanly. Again, use the trusty knife to give it a nice clean cut, and there's just a couple of tags there that need to come off, make it clean, and there we go. And the rest of those pieces are for later. And I'll just cut out the cockpit. There's in the cutout for the cockpit, there's basically just a couple of little tags that need to be cleared. Cut that piece out, and there we go. There we have it. So now that will pop on to the fuselage here, and it seems now there's an interesting point about this one. See how there's one of those serrated edges again on here. That's basically meaning, and if you look at the side of the fuselage, you can see that maybe it's not quite, it's really clear, but the fuselage comes down at an angle and then just basically squares off a little bit. So what's going to happen is that piece of fuselage is going to come down, and then it's actually just going to bend right on that that serrated edge there. That's actually meant to be a bend that will bend it and pop it into place here. So that's going to have to bend into place, clip through the slots on the side of the fuselage, and then it's going to bend down, and I think should bend fairly cleanly. And then you know, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using our pegs and our elastic bands to hold that down. So we'll do that in a minute after we finish off this piece. So I'm going to point something out to you that is one of those things where you know, I probably would have paid to look ahead a little bit. So what happened was that when I glued this piece, which is the bottom piece of the fuselage, in place, let me just see if I can get the number for you. It was capital I, lowercase capital I. When I glued that I on, and I put in the glue all around the edges, etc., I also made a point. I did it very deliberately to glue along this end here, and looks to me like now that was a mistake, because now that I've glued that on, I actually need to get it off again, because what I have to do is I have to cut this out along those edges, and this edge here should just pop out because this becomes the hatch that opens up. Well, it's not going to work if it's glued onto the end. It's you know, according to the plan, it basically becomes a door that pops off, and if it's true to the way the other model works, there's going to be, yeah, I can see it now. There's a sort of a bracket that hooks under, that basically that forms part of the door. So it kind of clips in at one end, and there's a little tiny piece that I'm going to have to locate because it doesn't have a letter or anything like that, that basically forms the piece on the door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the camera and cut that. Well, I'm going to cut that out, and then you know, I can cut out this piece here. That's actually pretty straightforward. Just down to that part, and alright, so that's actually cuts pretty cleanly, and that's fine. And let me see, I think it might pay to basically cut this edge here, because that's really what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to cut back right very close to that edge where where I did have the glue that glues it to the end, so I can make a nice clean edge to this little hatch that's going to be on here. And if I'm careful, just cut carefully. I can feel the knife sliding through the balsa. Don't want to overdo it or push too hard, especially where I'm pushing against. I can feel some parts where a little bit of glue has soaked into the wood, so I want to be careful about that. In the end, I mean, the goal is not to break anything. I want to have a nice, clean, fairly straight edge and no breaks. So it's good to have a nice, clean, sharp knife, but be just patient and careful while cutting it. I'm going to turn that around and cut from the other side. So hopefully you guys, if you've watched this before you do what I'm doing, were able to stop and not glue along that edge there, because that was really the little mistake that I made. But it's not the end of the world. Again, you know, this stuff is really very forgiving if you're careful. So here we go down here. We cut down and we get to the end. There we go. You can feel that it's loose now. And I think we have our hatch. Where am I missing? This somewhere here that's just not quite loose. I just have to, oh, there we go, perfect. All right, so there's our hatch door. And what I want to point out is that way back, we saved this piece. It was P. If you remember, P sort of popped out of the middle of one of the other pieces on the card. It was one of the larger pieces, and this little piece here was P. Well, what P is going to be, if you notice that there's a hole in there, there's going to be a magnet, right? So P is going to slot into the end of the of this hatch location here. There'll be a magnet in there, and there'll be a magnet in this end of the hatch, and that's basically going to give it a nice firm click close and easy open to get into the battery area. So I'll pop that out. That one's easy, and just see if I can get my clicks. I can't see on that side where the tags are. There's one here. There we go. I think that's even all we need, and you'll see that this is where I'll be getting my trusty tweezers out, because these will need. This is one of the things that happens with these mini models, is even my little fingers are going to be too big for this. So what's actually going to happen is that this is going to slot into the two slots just on each side here. Oops, there we go. And Will be gluing that, and I probably will use a bit of super glue for that, just to glue that into place, so that will hold one end of the battery, and one end of a pair of batteries, a pair of magnets, and the other magnet will go into that hole, and it will clip down onto that little bracket there. And so what I need to do now, and I'll turn the camera off while I do it, because it could be a bit of a hunt and peck exercise. I'll go and find, there's another little piece that needs to go onto the end, this end of the hatch, and I think you can see, actually, it looks to me like there might even be two of them, because those little marks that are on the end of the hatch, they're going to be where I'm going to stick two other pieces of balsa that basically give me a kind of a little hinge for that end of the hatch to clip in. So let me see if I can find that, and I'll get right back to you.